I'm Congressman Sanford Bishop. Together, we have delivered real results for Middle and Southwest Georgia, from increased funding for our military and veterans to disaster relief for Hurricane Michael and now COVID-19. I believe God has blessed me with tools and talents to use my position in Washington as a ministry of public service. With your vote on November 3rd, you can keep a proven leader working for you. Learn more at sanfordbishop.com.
Too often, people are very hasty to try to see about themselves, physically and economically. They wonder how they are doing, as it relates to being in good physical shape and being healthy. They also wonder how they are doing as it relates to economics. Can they pay their bills and do they have money to live a quality life? However, for some reason, too often, many of us don't think about the psychological and the emotional impact of really having a well-rounded life. You know, I know that when you tell a person that they need you to go to the doctor, they say, "Okay, I'll call my medical doctor." But if in fact you make a suggestion that you might need to go to see a psychologist or counselor or psychiatrist, then they look kind of askantly at that. And with the onset of COVID-19, not only is it affecting us, physically and sociologically and economically, but we kind of overlook the fact that it's affecting us emotionally too. I know I'm climbing the wall. I'm used to going to the movie and, going and having a cocktail and let me say a good thing too, and going to church. But because I'm not able to do that anymore, I am sure, and I mentioned it to my wife. It's having a psychological and an emotional effect on me. So I just happened to run across somebody named Dr. Tonja Simmons Lee, who's a very educated and a professional counselor, and she's taught school and been an assistant principal, and she's a doctor, and she's working on a PhD. So I said, well, since these emotional and psychological problems are kind of tying into present day, maybe I should talk to her. And not only can she help me, but she can help all of us. And whether you admit it or not, I know it's kind of long, Tanja, and I'm gonna let you talk a long time once I get into it. You know what I'm saying? But whether you admit it or not, then we all need some kind of counseling uh, and emotional or psychological help. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Havisham. You did good on that one. And as I said, we want to talk to her. And the reason I use that long introduction, Dr. Lee, is because I want you to take your time. Even without COVID-19, we need psychological help and counseling. But we want to talk about, how that COVID how it has probably affected us, with, being staying 6 feet and staying at home and getting food to go and things of that nature. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am elated to be in this space and to have this moment to be able to educate and to bring our communities in. In saying that, as you said, I am a 20 plus year educator. I started out as an elementary school teacher with students of special needs. I migrated up to a high school counselor, and then I became a middle school administrator where I spent 12 years doing that. And at the same time, I was an adjunct instructor of psychology for about 15 years. So, present day, I'm the executive director for counseling services at Central Georgia Technical College. And we are doing some great things at Central Georgia Tech because we realize that getting an education during this time, or even just period, is a challenge. And having a safe space or someone who can just kind of give you some pointers will definitely help you to meet that definition of success for you. Throughout my time, I've become a person of knowledge. I always want to figure out how can I best serve the people who depend on me, whether they know it or not. And that means putting some things in place, some programming, some teaching, some trainings, so that the information is available. And part of that information of availability is removing the stigma in our communities, especially our communities of color. Talking to someone about what's going on with you has always been a no-no. I mean, my hair may speak one age, but I am of the understanding. I grew up with what happens in my house stays in my house. And that type of teaching, that type of understanding has really kept our communities from expressing that something's not well with them. That, it's my business, and if I share it, then somebody will use it against me. We have some serious challenges when it comes to trusting someone, to believing that they'll take that information and actually help us as opposed to harm us. That dates even farther back to the Tuskegee experiment, when we thought we were going in to get some support and some help, and we ended up being guinea pigs, ended up dying, and still having challenges with that type of thing. So whenever you talk about going to the doctor and sharing with them what's going on, you don't get the full picture for the emotional or mental components of it. What they would tell you are those physical ailments. And that's part of the challenge, because this is what's happening. This is what I feel in my body as it relates to pain or it relates to discomfort. It's not about the thoughts that I'm having, because I don't want anyone to think I'm crazy. I don't want anybody to think I'm suicidal, or I don't want anyone to ostracize, or even more importantly, isolate themselves from me. And then I'm really on this island by myself, which is a whole nother conversation, because we just exited the month of September, which is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. In our communities, that number has spiked, and it has spiked more importantly in our Black males ages 5 to 11.
Wow.
These young males and young children, period, they're dying by suicide at such an alarming rate. As a matter of fact, over a span of about 20 years, there's been a 73% increase in the number of Black children who have died by suicide. 73% increase over the period of about 20 years. That last data was capped off in 2017. So we do have an issue. It was such an issue that the Congress member, Bunny Watson, if I'm not mistaken, she commissioned the Sound the Alarm report to find out what's causing the rise in Blacks for suicide. And it was released earlier this year. And I had a chance to interview one of the participants, one of the persons who created that data and that information, to where it's all out. If someone is interested in, you just put in Sound the Alarm on the internet and you'll pull up that document. But what they found is that adverse childhood experiences, those are things that happen in our environment, whether it's, a family member who's gone to prison, whether it's you're sitting fighting in your homes, or someone has violated your body, either touched you inappropriately or hit you without just providing you with a redirection. We spank children, but then there are some children who are being beaten. Then you have some other factors that are in there that encompasses drug usage. So there are about 12, I can't remember the exact number, but there are about 12 questions that are on there. And if you come back with, 3 or more, then you are in line. You have a greater increase for dealing with some mental health issues, developing a mental health illness, having some challenges with the police, because your brain has developed totally different. And if you don't have someone in your family who can provide you with some resiliency, it makes it even worse. So if, when they go to school and there's a teacher that invests in them, that builds up some of that issue that was in the environment or that was in the home. So there are a lot of challenges out there in our communities, and we really need to start having the conversations. We need to start getting to a place to where it's okay to not be okay, and then move forward with, this is what we're going to do about it. I know that one of the questions that was in the information that was shared with me about today's programming was, what do we do? What are some things we can do? I can tell you this, right by now, everybody can take a lesson from the Chicago mayor, Mayor Lightfoot. Her and one of her persons in her public health arena, they receive grants of about $20 million or so. And I'm sorry, yeah, I think it was 20 million. I could have the number off, but it was $8 million. And they are giving that money to about 32 different organizations in that area for Chicago, to where they can provide services to those high needs area where there is a low percentage of people who have insurance or have the ability to pay for healthcare services. And then they're also issuing $1.6 million to provide service for those who are homeless. And so they're trying to make it so in Chicago that they can eradicate, they can decrease the need for people who are living with mental health illnesses, because it's a disorder when it's diagnosed, but it becomes an illness when it's not treated or the treatment is not carried out or
Say
followed.
that again.
It is a disorder when it's diagnosed. It's kind of like, when you have diabetes and you go to the doctor because your sugar levels are either high or low. And then when they give you the medicine, whether it's metformin or you have to take the shot, now it becomes an illness when it gets out of control. But when they give you the medicine, it comes to a place to where it's settled and it's controlled. So it's just a disorder. But when it's not being medicated, when it's not receiving the treatment it needs, it becomes an illness. And that's the same thing with our mind. Someone could have schizophrenia, can be diagnosed with schizophrenia. But if they're taking their medicines, then they're no longer ill, because they still have a disorder, but it's not seen as an illness, because now we are putting things in place. Treatment is going on. It doesn't change the disorder, but it does take it from whether or not it's an illness. And I think we need to understand that, because just like we have diabetes, we have high blood pressure, we also have depression. We also have bipolar, which is probably one of the most misunderstood disorders that's out there right now, because you got bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. And the differences between the two is the severity of the symptomology of what's going on there. So I think we just really need to get to a place where we're educated ourselves and we're allowing ourselves to be educated so that we can take control of our own lives and take control of our bodies and our ability to move about. Historically, and I'll just take it back to, there's a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy. And she talks about how historically we have been seen as things and not as human beings. And that mindset, whether directly or indirectly, has carried itself out throughout our Black history, our Black culture, and our Black mindset, to where we're still doing things unconsciously that says the same thing about what was said about us when we were in that slave environment. And so it's kind of hard to say, I need to stop and take care of me, when that's not what I've seen displayed. I've seen my mom and them, my grandmama, them still go to work and do what they had to do, although they were sick. And we have to stop and take care of ourselves, because we don't have to do that anymore. Utilize that insurance card that you have and get you some counseling. Utilize your Medicaid, your Medicare, Care Source, Peace Care, Well Care. All of those allow for people to get some mental health services or counseling. And some people, they're just stuck, and they probably need to talk with someone who's a coach or who can kind of get them out of that rut. They may not have a true mental health diagnosis, but they may be in a place to where they're just stuck and don't know what to do. And so that part of it will allow them to feel down on themselves and create some things.
Yeah. And I think it's important what you just mentioned, because people are ranting, raving to get, the peach and all of these other types of care. But you know what? I have never heard anybody say that they wanted to use those resources for psychological counseling purposes. So, matter of fact, I didn't even know that you could use them. So that's why I'm asking you, to kind of emphasize that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and then the other thing I want to say before I forget it, because I want to see how many out of the 12 that that I checked. So you were saying there's some kind of survey or some kind of form, mm-hmm, or some kind of test or some kind of self-evaluation that we all can use just to try to see what our mental, psychological, and or emotional state is?
Yes, it's called, and you can actually go online and download it. It's called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's a test. I don't call it a test. It's a questionnaire, and you can look at it and see what happens. And I'm pulling it up so that I can kind of give you some true questions that are on it. Like the first question says, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? Act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? That's the first question. There is another question that says, was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? So they're trying to assess whether or not you saw child domestic violence in the household, or whether or not you were abused as a child. Did a household member go to prison? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? So they're trying to see also if there's this history of mental illness or mental health challenges within the family. And I often tell people sometimes you have to kind of sit down and find out what's going on in your family lineage. I remember growing up, and my mom would tell me, you didn't know everything about his family before you start having children, because you don't know what's hiding in the recesses. And at the time, she didn't have the adequate words to tell me that some of this stuff is genetically predisposed. You don't want to, start having children and there's some mental health issues or some disability challenges there. But now we really need to just know for ourselves so we can understand what's going on with us, so that we can have an agency about ourselves. We can speak from a place of using our own voice and be able to say, this is where I am, which brings me to another topic about having the language to share who we are and what we're feeling, being able to ask for what we need. And oftentimes I'll give some of the people I'm working with a feelings wheel or a feeling chart, because we generally don't go outside of our mad, angry, sad, happy, frustrated, irritated. We don't go outside of those, but there are many other words that are out there that can help us articulate and be able to express ourselves in a manner that when we ask for what we need, we can get it.
Let's talk a little bit about COVID, and react to, whether you think that this kind of dramatic change in lifestyle is affecting us psychologically. And of course, I don't know about y'all, but it shows it is really affecting me. And first of all, if it is, then talk about how you kind of deal with it, and then how do you determine the extent of the effect that it's having on us. And also, if you can remember all of this, what are some of the resources, that we can utilize to try to, to deal, to get the diagnosis to prevent the illness, if I'm saying that right, and to get the treatment. I'm trying to look, hey, Tonja, I'm trying to be the psychologist here.
Listen, you have to take control of yourself sometimes.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, how does that process work? And what we try to do is to inform, educate, and to motivate. And I know you and I talked a few months ago
Mhm.
about talking about counseling even before the impact of this COVID thing. So
Right.
then when I saw and when I began to realize personally that, hey man, this stuff really has an effect on you, I said, well, let me call Dr. Lee, and talk about. So talk about COVID and its impact and its effect and how it could be affecting and influencing us, and maybe what can we do about it.
They are varied. They are wide. They affect you differently than they would me. They would affect a child differently than they would an adult. But there are some commonalities. And one of those first commonalities is the isolation. Because when we went into that shutdown period, And you have to think about, there are some people who depend on the ability to be socialized. They depend on seeing people. And I'll start with our older Americans, our who, in they're already by themselves and trying to maintain their own independence, but they look forward to people coming by to see them. Going to church was the highlight of their week because they got a chance to be loved on, they got a chance to be talked to, they got a chance to matter. And then they could help out if they wanted to with volunteering. And so that gave them some purpose, that gave them an semblance to, I matter, I'm important. And when that was removed from some of them, it did allow some room for some depression. It did allow some room for some anxiety. It allowed for some room of stress and worry. And those things can aid in some medical challenges. When you're experiencing high or toxic levels of stress, it can affect your heart, it can affect your kidneys, it can affect your organs. And so that's one population where it really did have an issue. If I may, I'll tell a story, but I won't use names. Where this person who I know was going to see their mother, and they would go to the door and drop stuff off, and but wouldn't go in for fear of exposing their mother because the mother had some pre-existing conditions. And at one point, the mother said, "Boy, I raised you. I birthed you in this world. You're not going to treat me like I'm some stranger." And it had gotten to the point to where, although he was right there in front of her, the screen door was separating and she couldn't touch. She felt like, they start to feel like something's wrong with them. But in that son's mind, he was just trying to protect her, but that's not how it felt. So you have to think about that impact of COVID and what it did. And then you have the children who went from being socialized every day at school to having interactions to running off some stress, running off some issues, just kind of being able to continue to cope, to keep their head above, even though if they may have been having some other challenges, just to be able to go to school and be socialized. It was helpful. We did see a number of children who did not have that, and it resulted in some damaging behaviors, whether it was self-harming, what we would call the non-suicidal injury. They may have been cutting, or they may have started getting involved in some risky behaviors, to the fact to where they may have died by suicide or killed themselves because of that isolation, because of that inability to run off some of the pressures, which is what happens when we get into those non-suicidal injuries. When they start cutting, they're looking for a release. And so for some of the children, they never got a chance to get that release during that time frame, which created some turmoil in the homes, because now the child is in the home with the parents are in the home with each other, and there's no escape, and you kind of got to figure out how I'm going to deal with this. But when you don't have good coping skills and they're maladaptive, you're not figuring out the right thing to do. And so again, you're getting involved with some stuff that just aren't healthy, and it's causing some depression, it's causing some isolation, and you're feeling all alone, and you feel like you're the problem instead of the situation being that we're in COVID. And then, of course, like I said, you have that impact to where you have financial challenges, because now I'm not working. I have to be at home with my children. So we're down to one income. I may have been one of those persons who was working in fast food, or I may have been one of those persons who were working, in one of those jobs that pay anywhere from $7.50 to, $15. And my hours are now cut. So how do I take care of my family? So there's another level of stress. And with that kind of stress, you end up with some anger challenges, inability to be able to manage your emotions. Your intellectual IQ may still be high, but that emotional IQ has dropped. I'm not concerned about your feelings. I don't even know about mine. So don't ask me about, you just get these escalations of, leave me alone kind of thing. Because if you don't, you're going to get whatever I'm feeling. And that can create rifts in relationships, and not just your significant other.
Now, walk us through, Dr. Lee, if you would. This is a call to action.
This is a call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Havisham, interviewing uh, Dr. Tonja Lee. So now, what should we do? Talk about some of the avenues of treatment and addressing it, and approaches to at least dealing with ourselves from a psychological and an emotional and a depressive state.
I will say very quickly, going back to when we talked about the ACEs, I know that we put some questions out there, but I don't encourage anyone to go and complete that questionnaire alone, because that's not what it's designed for. You would need to kind of have a space to where you can process those things. And so, go to River Edge, go to some of those outlets, even Coliseum Hospital. We have a number of places where you can kind of get some support. With saying that, I do want to put out a call to action to some of these entities who have some monies and they don't know what to do with them. I will say invest those monies into mental health services for Macon-Bibb County and these other counties that are watching this, Peach County, Houston County, because there are a number of people who do not have access to care. They do not have the copay. They do not have the wherewithal to know that I can get some assistance with some of my challenges. So that's one of the things I will say. Don't do that questionnaire alone and think, okay, now I'm not good. That's not what that is about. That is a guide to support you. You need to do it in the care of someone who is able to interpret that information and then have that conversation. Also, I would say, give yourself some grace. Be patient with yourself, understanding that the times that you are in are new times. I'm not going to say it's a new normal. I've never said it was a new normal because this can't be normal. It's just new. It's just new. It's a new experience. So it's causing us to adjust. But give yourself some grace and then allow grace for some other persons. Part of giving yourself grace is to kind of incorporate some mindfulness activities, meaning that you're going to figure out, how do I ground myself in the midst of all this that's happening? There are some simple things we do. One of the things I will say, if you have a device, download the Calm app. It's free. There are some components that are cost, but for what you would need in that moment, it's called Calm, CALM, and it's an app. And if you're in love with basketball, LeBron James is reading, he's talking to you, trying to get you to calm down. You have some musical people on there who are doing it. So those are a few things to do. Also with the mindfulness, just kind of sit and kind of take some of those negative thoughts and turn around to positive thoughts. When people tell you you can't do this because of that, then you tell them, I can do this because I am that.
But what if somebody wanted to ask a question or wanted you to come out and maybe present or speak to them? Would you be willing to do that?
Most definitely. That is what I look forward to doing, is educating the people. And if you can look on to the Central Georgia Technical College website for counseling services, and we do have a listing of services that are out there that are free, those that take Medicaid. We do have, like I said, the suicide prevention hotline. We have that information out there. We also have the Georgia Crisis Access Line. And right now we have the warm lines for substance use. If you're having some challenges with that, you can talk with a live person. And then you just have the normal COVID line. So all that information is found on the Central Georgia Technical College School Counseling website. And you can call me 476-5167.
This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Havisham, having interviewed Dr. Tonja Lee. I really appreciate it. The information has been phenomenal. And then, I know it's tough times, but I think that we can all get through it because we need. Thank you so much, Doctor. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We look to talk to you real soon. Have a great day.